heard them arguing about me, of course. Not that they cared. Some people seem to think blind people are deaf as well, or they don't give a toss, just like the way people used to say I was a beggar. People make quick judgments, and that's that. It's like they were the blind ones. I was no beggar. I ran a small business. I'm a masseuse. I was then. I am now, I suppose. Anyway, back then my business was composed of 2 old chairs someone gave me and a regular spot in the shade of a tree on the main road to the big temple. Always a lot of walking traffic there, next to the pharmacy. The staff didn't seem to mind. Sometimes they even brought me coffee. Nice people. I did head and shoulders, hands and feet, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Enough to keep stressed and sore people going. Lots of pilgrims coming through town back then. Lots of sore feet. I had plenty of regulars too. People who swore by my hands. It didn't matter that I was blind. My fingers can feel knots, and I can read groans of pleasure and pain. Me being blind probably made it easier for some of my customers. Massage can feel a bit intimate for some folks. And if payment was by donation, that's just because it was the only way I could keep the tax collectors off my back. I made enough money to eat and pay my way. Mostly. It's not like there was ever enough work to go round. Plenty of people were just making it from one day to the next. Not just me. Not just the blind. But, of course, I was blind. Being blind meant I was a living example of sinfulness, according to the religious priests, or teachers, or lawyers, or whatever they like to call themselves. I had no legitimate place in the community because I was born blind and that was obviously my fault. Or it was my parents' fault, or their parents' fault, or you get the picture. I was never quite sure how far it might go back. Point was, I was a bad lad. Cursed from birth, a curse from birth. It was, apparently, the judgment of God, even if I knew nothing about it. Even if I couldn't do anything about it, I was bad. I always thought it was a load of rubbish. I didn't have much time for a God who was into random acts of cruelty. It did mean I could work on holy days, since I was an outcast anyway. The pharmacy was allowed to stay open too, being that people needed medicine. So, this holy day, a bunch of voices were involved in a discussion about why I was blind. Was it my fault or my parents'? Right in front of me. Of course, not for the first time, but like I wasn't there, which technically, because I was an outcast, I suppose I wasn't. But I was. And I'm blind, not deaf. When I was younger, I would have joined in. People hadn't liked it when I'd done that. Getting caught out by a blind man, having an outcast dare to speak, but it didn't always go well for me. Whacking a blind bloke's not a high-risk strategy. After I copped a few hidings, I tried a strategy of feigning a fit. That usually got rid of them fast, but sometimes there'd be one who'd try and look after me, and that made me feel bad. And it lost me customers. In the end, I decided to be deaf as well. Like it mattered what they thought. Anyway, this group seemed to be asking one bloke what he thought. Sounded like they considered him the boss, the smart one. Called him teacher or Jesus. Kept nagging at him to tell him who was right and who was wrong. Next thing I knew, footsteps came right up close to me, and a voice started to speak. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Now, that was new. I'd never heard that version of my problem. I'd been born blind so God could show how clever he was. Or she was. And if not being sure about that's another sin, add it to my list. Seems I've got a long one, but I did like the bit about it not being my fault, or Mum and Dad's. My folks are good people. They were supposed to kick me out when I became an adult, and I refused to admit that I was at fault for my blindness, but they stuck by me. It wasn't easy for them. A lot of their friends became ex-friends. Dad's a real quiet bloke, and Mum, she's even quieter. I heard her be very loud with her sister, though, when Auntie Flo suggested they get rid of me. Recommended a home. Didn't get many visits from Auntie Flo after that day. Big loss. Not. Dad came home with a few black eyes and bruises, but he never said where they came from. I did hear that one of his mates had to have a bit of dental surgery. I love my folks. I love them so much. Back to that day. I decided I didn't mind this new version I was hearing, and I thought the bloke had a nice voice, so I was a bit shocked when he spat at me. Or at least that's what I thought he did. Turns out he'd spat next to me. Still, not real nice. And then all his mates went quiet, and I heard him scrabbling about in the dirt next to my chairs. I was getting a bit nervy. Then I heard him whisper, "Stay calm. This will bring light." Next thing I knew, I felt fingers on my eyes, and I started to panic. He was rubbing something into my eyes, and I could smell the dirt, the mud he'd made with his spit, and I started to lash out. I mean, how would you feel about someone wiping their spit and dirt into your eyes? It was disgusting. It was insulting. I felt like he was telling me I was dirt. So I started to lash out. I was swinging punches and yelling, and I felt one or two of them connect, and I heard him grunt. And then I felt his hands on my wrists like two clamps. He was strong. But I was still yelling. I was not happy. I heard Moira, the chemist, come out of the pharmacy and ask what was going on, telling him to let me go. You could tell a crowd was gathering. I felt his lips up against my ear, and he was whispering, "Go. Wash in the pool of the scent." He just kept whispering it until I stopped struggling and could hear him. People were yelling, and I think some of his mates were holding my friends back. I shook him off. I spat on the ground at my feet, hoping he was still close. "Get stuffed," I said, and stormed off, leaving the commotion behind. Do you know what it's like to have the ground kicked from under your feet? To get lost in a blizzard of emotions that makes it impossible to think logically or remain coherent? That was me. That's where I was. All the years of feeling hurt and ignored, brought together by this mongrel who'd literally rubbed dirt in my face. I just stormed until I stopped. Stopped and listened and worked out where I was, until the shame of being me wound down. I had a stick, and I knew the roads in my town. People get out of the way of a blind man, some out of pity and others so they don't get contaminated by our sinfulness. I just walked until I was breathing normally. I couldn't believe what had happened. I'd been treated badly before, but this was something more. It felt personal. I smelled water, and I realised I stormed my way to the pool he'd named. The pool of the scent. I touched my eyes, and I felt the dried spit and dirt covering my skin. I felt sick. Carefully, I walked down the steps to the water. I didn't care why he'd said to come here. I was there, and I was going to wash away any memory of him and his insult. I was going to wash the day away. I sat for a while, with my feet in the water, just trying to understand what had happened. What had I ever done to him? What gave him the right? It didn't make sense. He hadn't laughed at me, and when he'd spoken, it had been quiet and insistent, not angry or cruel, but what he'd done. What he'd done. I dipped my hands into the water and cupped them. I leant over the water and brought my hands up, splashing water into my eyes. But there was so much grit, So I knelt down by the water and plunged my head into the pool, washing every last bit of the dirt and spit from my face. I lifted my head from the water. I heard a cockatoo scream in the sky above me. I knew the sound well. Then I felt the rush of wings close to my face. I saw a big white thing with a yellow bit on its head flying upwards. A big white thing with a yellow bit, like a flame on its head. I saw, I could see, and I had no idea what was going on. I sat there for hours trying to understand. Every single thing I saw was new to me, every single face a revelation. I was in shock. I had no reference for anything much. I was in joy. I felt like I'd stepped into another world, one with another dimension. I was in joyful shock. I thought I'd been fine as I was, and I had been, but this was indescribable. If you've never seen colour before, let me tell you, it floors you. Mind-blowing, hardly touches the sides. I cried and I laughed and I whooped. No one even asked why. Maybe it's that sort of place. Maybe they were used to it. I wasn't. It was dark. When I walked home, I got lost twice. Seeing where I was walking completely confused me. In the end, I shut my eyes and found a house that way I used to. I knocked and went in. I saw my mum and dad for the first time ever. I saw tears for the first time ever. I didn't even spare Jesus a thought. The new light in my world blinded me to anything other than my new normal. Over the next days, Mum and Dad slowly walked me through understanding what all the things I had never seen actually were. They walked with me and gave names, familiar names, to things I had only ever imagined. I spent a lot of time laughing, especially about things that I had imagined so differently to what they really looked like. Trees stunned me. If you're used to them, take another look. Incredible. And skin. Skin is bizarre. But eyes, they're the most amazing thing of all. Mine hadn't worked, and I'd never seen anyone else's. But eyes are insanely beautiful. And what they can do. I saw my face reflected in water and in shining metal. My face, my eyes. It was Dad who finally said I needed to go back to work. We needed my income, so 4 days after it happened, I went back to my chairs. I walked into the pharmacy and said hello to all the staff. I only knew who each person was when they spoke. It didn't go well. Moira asked who I was. "It's me, Darren, from outside." I said, "No," she replied. "You look like Darren, but you can't be." One of the others said that of course it was me, and an argument broke out, again as if I wasn't even there. Not arguing about why I was or wasn't blind, but whether I was me. I walked out. I was confused. It didn't stop. Old customers and regulars on the street refused to believe that I was me. Some said I was, some said I must be a relative or someone like me. Some felt uncomfortable now that I could see them. "It's me!" I laughed. "Me!" But it cut no mustard. "Then how were your eyes opened?" they asked. "The man called Jesus. He made spit mud, spread it on my eyes and said to me, 'Go to the pool of the scent and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They asked, "Where is he?" I said, I don't know. How would I know? What does it matter where he is?" It got weirder. Soon no one would come near me. They were talking about witchcraft or magic, miracles and cures and curses. Just got more and more scared. I tried to explain how good it was to see, but they wouldn't listen. No customers, new or old. I just sat there while they came and stared and whispered and left. No coffee from my old friends. Not a word of happiness for me. Just mistrust and fear. Eventually, a mob led by a couple of big blokes turned up and told me to come with them. They took me to the temple courtyard, said that the teachers and lawyers there wanted to know what was going on. A bad day got worse. I'd never seen the inside of the temple, and I'd never seen these men. They looked grim, stony-faced, annoyed. I was essentially thrown at their feet. I suppose it's easier to look down on someone when they're on the ground. So I got up. I faced them. I looked at them. And they asked me if I had been born blind. When I said that was true, they asked how I'd gained my sight, and I told them about the voices that day and the man Jesus and the spitting and the pool. He put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see. Some of them didn't like my story at all, I could tell. They started going on about how it had happened on a holy day, and how that was breaking the rules, and how this Jesus must be some sort of evil sinner if he didn't follow those rules. Of course, they weren't talking to me, but to each other. I was just there, a nothing again, a nobody. This wasn't about me seeing, it was about them and their rules. I wanted to tell them that I didn't give a stuff about their rules, but I did really care about being able to see. They weren't all in agreement. Some of the others started to say that something like this, me being the prime exhibit, could only be of God, and that this Jesus must not be a sinner. Back and forth, it was clear that what they cared about more than anything was a good argument, about winning a good argument. I thought they'd forgotten about me altogether, and I was considering leaving when one of them walked up to me and asked, "What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened." My whole life, they had ignored my existence, acted as if I was an insult to their world order, and now they wanted my opinion. The world turns. "He's a prophet," I said. Don't know where that came from, really, but shut them up for a bit. A few of them looked daggers at me. A few of them looked scared. Then one of the dagger eyes yelled out, "This is insane! I bet he was never blind in the first place." Oh, it got messy. I told him exactly how much I thought he knew about it, and then there was a bit of an all-in slanging match for a while until one of the old blokes got us all to shut up. He told the guards to go and get my parents. "If anyone knows that he was born blind or not, it'll be them. Agreed?" We agreed. And I felt like a worm. I knew how scared Mum and Dad would be when the guards turned up at the door. I knew how much they wanted to avoid any sort of trouble. All of a sudden, being able to see wasn't quite as wonderful as it had seemed. While we waited, they ignored me. Totally. But the crowd built, and I saw Moira and the rest of the crew from the pharmacy. She gave me the thumbs up. I can't tell you what that meant, knowing that she'd decided to believe me. Mum and Dad weren't exactly dragged in, but neither of them looked like they were happy to be there. They stood, heads bowed, in front of the priests and lawyers and teachers, not saying a word. "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" the older man asked. He was respectful, but Mum and Dad wouldn't look at him. Mum stole a glance at me and I just shook my head quickly. Dad answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that he sees now, nor do we know the man who opened his eyes. Ask him, he's an adult, he can speak for himself." It was about the longest speech I'd ever heard Dad give. And because I knew my dad, I knew that he believed in me. I also knew that he wasn't ducking for cover, but letting me take the lead. Some of the nastier ones started to yell at Dad to tell the truth, but the crowd wasn't having it. There was a bit of a rumble and a few shouts in support of my parents, and what an idiot got right in Dad's face, and it was then that Dad looked up for the first time. I've never seen my dad look like that. I was metres away and I was scared. The other guy froze, then backed away. I love my parents. The crowd just laughed. Important people don't like being laughed at. It was getting tense. They dismissed my parents and started on me again. A bunch of them were yelling at me, "Give glory to God! We know that this Jesus is a sinner!" It was because of what Dad had done. How he and Mum had been brave and trusted me. And because I was just completely over all this bullshit. I'd been blind a few days ago and now I could see, and all they cared about were rules, laws, appropriate behaviour. It didn't feel like a single one of them cared about me. But I knew who had. I'd missed it at the time, misunderstood, but I knew now. So I threw caution to the wind and let it rip. "I do not know whether he's a sinner," I screamed. "One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." And they shouted back, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" I just laughed. I couldn't help myself. The whole situation was insane. They were trying to make red into green, make good into bad, make joy into tears. They wanted me to say I was sorry that I could see and denounce the man who'd brought light into my world. I wasn't having it. "I told you already and you wouldn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" They spat at me. "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of the great prophet. We know that God has spoken to the prophet, but as for this Jesus, we do not even know where he comes from." I just didn't care anymore. I knew they'd never listen. So I looked up, just as my dad had done, and eyeballed the lot of them. Well, here is a mind-bending thing. You do not even know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We all know, and you tell us this, that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. There was silence. And then the crowd started to clap. Slowly at first, then growing in volume and intensity, they started to whoop and laugh and cheer. The gathering of leaders stared back at me with a level of hatred I wish I hadn't been able to see. And over the sound of the crowd, they condemned me. "You were born entirely in sin, and are you trying to teach us?" They motioned to the guards and they turned their backs and left. The first punch doubled me over, left me gasping for breath. The second broke my nose. I was dragged out of the temple and thrown into a van before being driven out of the city. I don't know how he found me, but that night I was sitting by the fire I'd built in the scrub, too scared to go back to my house and too sore to try going anywhere else, when Jesus walked up and sat down across the flames from me. He opened his pack and took out some rolls and a thermos. We sat and ate. My jaw was killing me, but I ate. He looked up and asked, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" It sounded like an invitation. I answered, "I don't know. Who is he? Tell me so that I can believe in him." And he smiled. "You have seen him, and he is the one speaking to you." I was done. There was nothing left for me, and nowhere that was safe. I looked up at him and I stared into those weird eyes of his, the ones that seemed to search out what you most want and what you're most scared of. But All I saw that night was a depth of compassion that told me I was safe and that there might be a place where I could belong. It had been a miracle being able to see, but this was something equally important. I felt seen and wanted and welcome and worthwhile. Lord, I believe, I said. And I saw who he truly was. I saw without needing eyes that he was the answer, my future. Next morning we walked back to town and were met by the same guards. We weren't allowed into town. They called some of the priests and teachers of the law. The cars came and the suits and robes spilled out. They looked impressive and slick, and we looked unimpressive and grubby. A young itinerant teacher and a man born blind. A man who could now see clearly. Jesus said, I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. They heard him, and the older man, the leader, said to him, Surely we are not blind, are we? Jesus replied quietly, If you were blind, you would not be so lost. But as long as you say we see, you will remain lost. We walked past them into the city. No one tried to stop us. The older man waved the guards down. We walked to my parents' house. 2 days later my bag was packed and I joined Jesus' travelling circus. The things I've seen. The things I've seen.